The apartment was silent in that fragile way that only early morning brings, when darkness hasn't quite surrendered to dawn and the world holds its breath between yesterday and today. Marcus Chen moved through his tiny kitchen with practiced quiet, his bare feet making no sound on the worn linoleum. He had mastered the art of silence over 3 years of single fatherhood, learning to navigate the cramped space without waking his son, without disturbing the precious few hours of peace that belonged to no one but himself. The clock on the microwave blinked 4:17 in pale green digits. In 43 minutes his alarm would sound. In an hour and 12 minutes, he would wake 6-year-old Tyler for school. In 2 hours and 47 minutes, he would clock in for his shift as a maintenance technician at Sterling Pharmaceuticals, the gleaming tower of glass and ambition that dominated the city's downtown skyline. But these 43 minutes, these stolen fragments of time before duty called, belonged to him alone. He filled the ancient coffee maker with water, the pipes groaning softly in protest. The apartment was cold, the kind of cold that seeps through single-pane windows and finds every gap in weather stripping. He kept the thermostat low to save money, wrapping Tyler in extra blankets at night and wearing layered sweaters during the day. It was one of 1,000 small economies that shaped their life, invisible to anyone who hadn't learned to count pennies like heartbeats. Through the kitchen window, he could see the city beginning to stir. Delivery trucks rumbling down narrow streets, the occasional taxi passing beneath flickering streetlights. Somewhere in that sprawl of concrete and ambition, people slept in beds that cost more than his yearly rent. Somewhere, decisions were being made in boardrooms he would only ever enter to fix a malfunctioning air conditioning unit or replace fluorescent bulbs. That was the natural order of things, and Marcus had made peace with it long ago. Or so he told himself. The coffee began to percolate, filling the kitchen with its bitter warmth. Marcus leaned against the counter, closing his eyes for just a moment, allowing exhaustion to press down on his shoulders like a physical weight. He had worked a double shift yesterday, covering for a colleague who called in sick, the extra hours necessary to pay for Tyler's speech therapy sessions. The boy had struggled with pronunciation since he was 3, words tangling in his mouth like stubborn knots. Insurance covered almost nothing. The therapist cost $200 a session. They went twice a month, and Marcus worked doubles to make it happen. He didn't resent it. How could he? Tyler was his son, his reason for breathing, the one pure thing in a world that had taken so much from him. His wife, Sarah, had died when Tyler was 18 months old, a car accident on a rainy Tuesday that transformed Marcus from a husband and father into simply a father, from a man with a partner to face the world, to a man standing alone against an endless tide of responsibility. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The grief had been overwhelming at first, a crushing weight that made breathing feel like rebellion. But Tyler needed him, and so Marcus learned to function through the pain, to wake each morning and put one foot in front of the other, to smile when his son smiled and to hide his tears until the boy was safely asleep. Over time, the grief had transformed into something else, not gone but integrated, a scar that marked him but no longer bled. A sound broke the silence. Marcus froze, his hand halfway to the coffee pot. The sound came again, soft and muffled, from somewhere near the front of the apartment. Not Tyler's room. The boy's door was still closed, and Marcus knew the particular quality of his son's movements well enough to distinguish them from anything else. This was different, foreign, wrong. His heart began to pound. The apartment building was old, the locks barely adequate. There had been break-ins before, twice in the past year. Mrs. Chen down the hall had been robbed 3 months ago. her modest television and laptop stolen while she visited her sister in the hospital. Marcus had reinforced their door with an additional deadbolt, but fear was a companion that never fully left. He moved silently toward the front room, adrenaline sharpening his senses. The sound came again, and now he could place it. A soft, shaking breath, human and close. Someone was in his apartment. He reached for the baseball bat he kept by the coat closet, fingers closing around the worn wood. His mouth was dry. His mind raced through scenarios, each more frightening than the last. If someone was here to rob them, he had nothing worth taking. If someone was here to hurt them, he would fight with everything he had. He rounded the corner into the small living room, bat raised, and stopped so abruptly he nearly stumbled. A woman sat on his threadbare couch, her face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She wore an expensive coat, dark wool that probably cost more than his monthly rent, and beneath it he could see the edge of a tailored dress, elegant even in disarray. Her dark hair fell around her face in waves that looked professionally styled, though now disheveled. On the floor beside her sat a leather handbag, the kind that came from stores Marcus only passed on his way to work, never entering. He knew her. Not personally, but the way everyone at Sterling Pharmaceuticals knew her. Dr. Victoria Lang, the CEO, the woman whose face appeared in company newsletters and business magazines, whose reputation for brilliance and ruthlessness preceded her like thunder before a storm. She was 42 years old, a widow, a scientist who had built one of the most successful pharmaceutical companies in the country through sheer force of will and intellect that bordered on genius, and she was crying in his living room at 4:23 in the morning. Marcus lowered the bat slowly, confusion replacing fear. "Dr. Lang," she looked up, and the raw pain in her eyes hit him like a physical blow. Her face was streaked with tears, mascara running in dark tracks down pale cheeks. Her eyes, usually so sharp and assessing, were red and swollen and desperately, achingly sad. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking on the words. "I didn't know where else to go." Marcus stood frozen, his mind struggling to process the impossible scene before him. The CEO of Sterling Pharmaceuticals, a woman worth hundreds of millions, a woman who commanded boardrooms and made decisions that affected thousands of lives, was sitting on his second-hand couch, crying like her heart had shattered into pieces too small to ever reassemble. "How did you—" he began, then stopped. How did she get in? How did she know where he lived? How did she end up here, of all places, in a building where the elevator barely worked and the hallway smelled of old cooking oil and desperation? Victoria wiped her face with trembling hands, smearing the mascara further. "Your address," she said, her voice thick with tears. "It's in the employee database. I've been driving for hours. I couldn't go home. I couldn't be alone in that house again. I needed to be somewhere real." "Somewhere real," Marcus repeated slowly, still trying to make sense of the situation. She looked around the small apartment, her gaze taking in the peeling paint on the walls, the second-hand furniture, the plastic bins of toys stacked neatly in the corner, the framed crayon drawings that Tyler had made hanging on the walls like precious art. "Somewhere that feels like people actually live," she said softly. "Not like a museum. Not like a tomb." Marcus set the bat down carefully, his initial shock beginning to give way to something else. He had seen grief before. He recognized its contours, its weight, the way it could break through even the strongest defenses and leave a person raw and vulnerable and desperately human. He moved slowly toward the kitchen, giving her space. "I'm making coffee," he said quietly. "Would you like some?" Victoria nodded, her hands still shaking. "Please." He poured 2 cups, adding sugar to both because he sensed she needed it, and brought them back to the living room. He handed her one and sat in the armchair across from her, maintaining distance, not wanting to crowd her in whatever crisis had brought her here. She wrapped both hands around the mug, as if drawing warmth from it, and took a small sip. "Thank you," she whispered. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the wall clock and the distant rumble of early morning traffic. Marcus studied her face, seeing past the expensive clothes and polished exterior to the exhaustion carved into every line, the darkness beneath her eyes, the tremor in her hands that spoke of sleepless nights accumulated like debts that could never be repaid. "My daughter died 3 years ago today," Victoria said suddenly, her voice flat and hollow. "Leukemia. She was 9 years old." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and irrevocable. Marcus felt his chest tighten with familiar pain. He understood loss, understood the particular cruelty of marking time by anniversaries of absence. "Her name was Sophie," Victoria continued, staring into her coffee as if it held answers. "She loved science, wanted to be a doctor like me. She used to sit in my office after school, drawing pictures of cells and asking questions about how medicine worked." A sob caught in her throat. "I thought I could save her. I have all this knowledge, all these resources, and I couldn't save my own child." Marcus swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," he said, knowing the words were inadequate, but offering them anyway. Victoria looked up at him, tears streaming fresh down her face. "I saw you," she said. "Last week in the cafeteria. You were with your son." Marcus remembered. Tyler had been excited about a school project, had insisted on coming to see where Daddy worked. Marcus had taken his lunch break to walk the boy through the lobby, showing him the fountain and the tall ceilings, letting Tyler press his small face against the glass and look out over the city. "He has your eyes," Victoria continued, her voice cracking. "And he was laughing, this pure, beautiful laugh, and you were looking at him like he was the entire world." She pressed a hand to her chest, as if trying to hold something inside that was threatening to spill out. "I stood there watching you, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I laughed like that, or the last time anyone looked at me the way you looked at him. Dr. Lang, do you know what I did after Sophie died?" She interrupted, the words tumbling out now like a dam had broken. "I threw myself into work, built the company bigger, stronger, more successful. I told myself it was for her, that I was creating something meaningful, that her death wouldn't be meaningless if I could use it to help others." She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "But the truth is, I just couldn't bear to feel anything. So I stopped. I stopped feeling, I stopped living, I just existed." Marcus felt a lump forming in his throat. He recognized this story too. It was his story, in different words, the same desperate attempt to outrun grief by filling every moment with motion, with purpose, with anything that kept the pain at bay. "Tonight I went home to that empty house," Victoria continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, all 23 rooms of it. "I walked through Sophie's room, which I've kept exactly as she left it. I sat on her bed and I realized—" She broke off, covering her face with her hands. "I realized I've been dead for 3 years. I'm breathing, working, existing, but I'm not alive. I'm not connected to anything or anyone. I'm just hollow." She looked at Marcus then, really looked at him, and her eyes were filled with such desperate loneliness that he felt it resonate in his own chest. "I got in my car and I started driving. I didn't know where I was going. I just couldn't be in that house anymore. Couldn't be alone with all that emptiness. And somehow," she gestured helplessly around the small apartment, "I ended up here, at your address. I don't know why. I needed to be somewhere real." Marcus set his coffee down carefully. His alarm would go off in 17 minutes. Tyler would wake in less than an hour. His life, His carefully constructed routine of survival and responsibility was about to resume. But in this moment, in this strange, suspended slice of time, none of that seemed to matter. What mattered was the woman sitting across from him, powerful and accomplished, and completely, utterly lost. "When my wife died," Marcus said quietly, surprising himself, "I didn't think I could survive it. The grief was so huge, so overwhelming. I felt like I was drowning in it every single day." He met Victoria's eyes. "But Tyler needed me, and I realized that the only way through the pain was through it, not around it, not over it, through it." Victoria wiped her eyes, listening intently. "Some days are better than others," Marcus continued. "Some days I wake up and I can breathe. Some days the weight is so heavy I don't know how I'll make it to bedtime, but I keep going because he needs me, and because—" He paused, searching for words. "Because being present for his life, really present, means I have to be alive myself. I can't just go through the motions. He deserves more than that." "How do you do it?" Victoria asked, her voice raw with need. "How do you stay present when everything hurts?" Marcus thought about that for a moment. "You find small things," he said finally. "Tyler's laugh, the way he holds my hand when we cross the street, the terrible drawings he makes that I hang on the walls like they're masterpieces, the moments when he says something so wise or funny that I forget to be sad for a while." He smiled slightly. "You find reasons to be grateful for what you still have instead of only mourning what you lost." Victoria stared at him, and something shifted in her expression. The raw grief was still there, but beneath it now was something else, a flicker of recognition, of possibility, of the faintest hint that maybe, just maybe, there was a way back to the land of the living. "I don't remember how," she whispered. "I don't remember how to be grateful, how to laugh, how to feel anything except emptiness and guilt." "Then maybe you need to relearn," Marcus said gently. Before Victoria could respond, a small voice called out from down the hallway. "Daddy!" Marcus turned to see Tyler standing in the doorway of his room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His dinosaur pajamas rumpled, his dark hair sticking up in all directions. The boy looked at Victoria with curious but unafraid eyes. "Who's that?" Tyler asked, his words slightly slurred with sleep and the lingering effects of his speech delay. Marcus stood, moving toward his son. "This is Dr. Lang, buddy. She works with Daddy. She's visiting." Tyler considered this information with the serious contemplation that children apply to unexpected situations. Then he walked past Marcus and right up to Victoria, studying her face with the frank assessment only children can manage. "You're crying," Tyler observed. Victoria nodded, not bothering to hide it. "Yes." "Why?" "Because I'm sad," Victoria said simply, her voice thick. Tyler thought about this for a moment. Then he did something that made Marcus's heart clench and Victoria's breath catch. He climbed onto the couch beside her and gently took her hand in his small one. "It's okay to be sad," Tyler said seriously. "Daddy says sometimes we need to cry to let the hurt out, like when you have a splinter and you have to take it out, even though it hurts more at first." Victoria stared at the small hand holding hers, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. But these tears were different somehow, cleaner, as if something frozen inside her was beginning, finally, to thaw. "That's very wise," she whispered. "Do you want to see my dinosaurs?" Tyler asked. "They help when I'm sad." Victoria let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "I would love to see your dinosaurs." Tyler jumped down and ran back to his room, returning moments later with an armful of plastic dinosaurs in various states of wear. He climbed back onto the couch and began arranging them on the cushion between himself and Victoria, narrating their names and characteristics with the earnest expertise of a 6-year-old expert. Marcus watched from the kitchen doorway, coffee forgotten, as his son unknowingly offered the CEO of a billion-dollar company the one thing her wealth and power couldn't buy: genuine, uncomplicated human connection. Tyler talked about T-Rexes and Triceratops, about which ones were herbivores and which were carnivores, about how the asteroid killed them all, but their bones helped us remember them. And Victoria listened, really listened, as if this small boy's words held the secrets of the universe. Her tears continued to fall, but her shoulders had relaxed. Her hands had stopped shaking. And when Tyler accidentally knocked a stegosaurus onto the floor and apologized with heartbreaking sincerity, Victoria smiled, a small, genuine smile that transformed her entire face. It was the first real smile Marcus had ever seen on her. The alarm on Marcus's phone buzzed, marking 5 o'clock. The spell broke slightly, reality reasserting itself. Marcus had to get ready for work. Tyler needed breakfast. The day, with all its demands and responsibilities, was beginning. Victoria seemed to realize this too. She gently extracted her hand from Tyler's and stood, smoothing her coat with trembling fingers. "I should go," she said quietly. "I'm sorry for intruding like this, for falling apart in your home." "You didn't fall apart," Marcus said, meeting her eyes. "You just felt something, maybe for the first time in a long time." Victoria looked at him, and in her expression he saw recognition, gratitude, and something else, a question she didn't quite know how to ask. Tyler tugged on her coat. "Will you come back?" he asked. "You didn't finish meeting all my dinosaurs." Victoria knelt down to his level, and Marcus saw her hands steady as she reached out to gently touch the boy's cheek. "I would really like that," she said softly, "if your daddy says it's okay." Tyler looked at Marcus with hopeful eyes. Marcus felt the weight of the moment, understanding that something significant was happening, that whatever strange collision had brought Victoria Lang to his door at 4 in the morning was not finished, not by a long way. "You're welcome here," Marcus said quietly, "anytime you need somewhere real." Victoria stood slowly, her eyes bright with tears again, but different tears, tears that acknowledged pain without drowning in it, tears that made space for something other than emptiness. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not turning me away, for treating me like a person instead of a title." "You are a person," Marcus said simply, "just one who forgot for a while." Victoria moved toward the door, but paused with her hand on the knob. She turned back, and in her eyes was a vulnerability that Marcus suspected few people ever saw. "The grief doesn't go away, does it?" she asked softly. "No," Marcus said honestly, "but it changes. It becomes something you carry instead of something that carries you. And on good days, you remember that love was worth the pain of losing it." Victoria nodded slowly, absorbing this truth. She opened the door, letting in the gray light of early morning, then turned back one more time. "I'll see you at work," she said, but there was a question in it, a need for reassurance that this strange, vulnerable moment wouldn't disappear completely in the harsh light of day. "Yes," Marcus said, "you will." She left then, her footsteps echoing down the stairwell, and Marcus closed the door behind her. He stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened, trying to understand how his carefully ordered life had just tilted on its axis. Tyler tugged at his leg. "Daddy, I like her. She's nice." Marcus picked up his son, holding him close. "Yeah, buddy, I think she is." Through the window, he watched Victoria's black car pull away from the curb, disappearing into the awakening city. Somewhere in that expensive vehicle, a woman who had forgotten how to live was carrying a small seed of hope, planted by a 6-year-old boy and his struggling father. Marcus didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if Victoria would return, or if this Strange encounter would fade into a strange memory neither of them would acknowledge. But he knew one thing with certainty. Something had shifted in the early morning darkness, something fragile and precious and worth protecting. The world was waking now. Coffee needed to be finished. Tyler needed breakfast. Work called. But for just a moment longer, Marcus held his son close and let himself wonder what it would mean to open his carefully guarded world to someone who needed it as desperately as Victoria Lang clearly did. Outside, the city continued its relentless forward motion, indifferent to the small miracles that happened in its forgotten corners, where loneliness met loneliness and somehow, impossibly, created the faintest possibility of connection. The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo of normalcy and anticipation. Marcus went to work, performed his duties with the same quiet efficiency he always had, and tried not to think about the fact that somewhere in the building, 27 floors above him, Victoria Lang was conducting board meetings and making decisions that affected thousands of lives. He wondered if she remembered that morning, if she regretted the vulnerability she'd shown, if she would pretend it never happened. He had his answer on Thursday afternoon. Marcus was in the mechanical room on the 14th floor, replacing a faulty circuit breaker when his supervisor appeared in the doorway, looking confused and slightly nervous. "Chen," the man said, scratching his head, "you're wanted in the executive suite, top floor." Marcus froze, wrench in hand. "Why?" His supervisor shrugged. "Didn't say. Just said to send you up immediately." The elevator ride to the 27th floor felt like ascending into another world. Marcus had only been to the executive level once before, during new employee orientation 3 years ago, a brief tour that had felt more like visiting a museum than a workplace. The doors opened onto a reception area that looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine. Marble floors, modern art on the walls, furniture that probably cost more than his car. The receptionist, a young woman in a crisp suit, looked up and smiled. "Mr. Chen, Dr. Lang is expecting you. Conference room 3, down the hall to your left." Marcus walked down the corridor, his work boots feeling out of place on the expensive carpet. Through glass walls he could see executives in meetings, their worlds of strategy and finance as foreign to him as quantum physics. He found conference room 3 and knocked softly. "Come in," Victoria's voice called. She stood at the window looking out over the city, and when she turned, Marcus was struck by how different she looked from that broken woman on his couch. Her hair was pulled back severely, her suit impeccable, her expression composed. But when their eyes met, he saw something underneath the professional facade. Uncertainty, hope, fear, all tangled together. "Mr. Chen," she said formally, then stopped. Her composure cracked slightly. "Marcus, thank you for coming." "Ma'am," Marcus said, standing awkwardly by the door. "Please, sit." She gestured to the conference table, and they both sat, the polished wood surface between them like a barrier between their worlds. Victoria folded her hands on the table, and Marcus noticed they were trembling slightly. "I wanted to apologize," she began, her voice controlled but strained. "For the other morning, for showing up at your home unannounced, for falling apart, for putting you in an uncomfortable position." "You don't need to apologize," Marcus said quietly. "I do," Victoria insisted. "It was inappropriate, unprofessional. I shouldn't have—" She stopped, pressing her lips together. "I shouldn't have burdened you with my grief." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Dr. Lang, you didn't burden me. You were hurting, and you needed help. That's not something to apologize for." Victoria looked at him, and he saw the walls she'd built crumbling slightly. "I haven't talked about Sophie with anyone in 2 years," she said softly. "I haven't let anyone see me like that since she died. But that morning with you and Tyler—" She swallowed hard. I felt something I hadn't felt in so long. I felt human. You are human, Marcus said, echoing his words from that morning. Am I? Victoria asked, and there was real doubt in her voice. Sometimes I'm not sure anymore. I've spent 3 years being a CEO, a scientist, a success story, but I forgot how to be Victoria. I forgot how to be... She trailed off, unable to finish. A mother, Marcus said gently. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back fiercely. Yes, and that morning, watching Tyler with his dinosaurs, seeing the way you looked at him, the way he just accepted me without judgment, without fear. She took a shaking breath. I realized how much I've been starving for that kind of connection. Tyler asked about you, Marcus said. Every day since. He wants to know when the sad lady is coming back to see his dinosaurs. A small, genuine smile crossed Victoria's face. He called me the sad lady? He's 6. He calls it like he sees it. Victoria laughed, a short, surprised sound that seemed to startle her. He's remarkable. You've raised an extraordinary child. I'm trying, Marcus said. Some days are better than others. They sat in silence for a moment, and Marcus could feel the weight of unspoken things hanging between them. Finally, Victoria spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I was wondering if... She stopped, clearly struggling. If maybe I could see him again. See you both. Not here, not as CEO and employee, but as... She gestured helplessly. As people. As someone who needs to remember how to be around life instead of just work. Marcus studied her face, seeing the vulnerability beneath the professional armor, the desperate loneliness that wealth and success couldn't touch. He thought about the risks, how strange this was, how complicated it could become, but he also thought about that morning, about how Tyler's simple kindness had cracked something open in this powerful woman. About how sometimes the most important thing you could do was show up for someone who was drowning. Saturday, Marcus said. We usually go to the park in the morning. Tyler likes to feed the ducks. You could join us if you want. Victoria's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't expected him to say yes. Really? Really, but not as Dr. Lang, CEO, just as Victoria. Just as someone who needs to remember what it's like to feed ducks with a 6-year-old. I don't know if I remember how to do that, Victoria admitted. Then it's time you relearned, Marcus said, standing. 9 o'clock, Riverside Park by the pond, bring bread. Saturday morning dawned cold and bright, the kind of autumn day where the sky was impossibly blue and the air had a crisp quality that made everything feel sharper, more present. Marcus and Tyler arrived at the park at 8:50, carrying a bag of stale bread from the discount bakery 3 blocks from their apartment. Tyler was vibrating with excitement, having talked about nothing else for 2 days. Is she really coming, Daddy? Tyler asked for the 5th time. She said she would, Marcus replied, though he wasn't entirely sure. Part of him wondered if Victoria would change her mind, if the distance between their worlds would prove too great once she was away from the vulnerability of that early morning encounter. But at 9 o'clock exactly, a black car pulled into the parking lot, and Victoria emerged. She looked different from the woman in the conference room, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair down around her shoulders. She looked younger, softer, and deeply nervous as she approached them. Hi, she said quietly. You came, Tyler shouted, running to her and grabbing her hand with the unself-conscious affection of childhood. Daddy said you would, but I wasn't sure. Come on, the ducks are waiting. Victoria let herself be pulled toward the pond, glancing back at Marcus with an expression of wonder and fear mixed together. Marcus followed, carrying the bread bag, watching as Tyler chattered nonstop about the ducks, about school, about everything and nothing. They spent the next hour by the pond, tearing bread into pieces and tossing it to the ducks and geese that congregated near the shore. Tyler provided running commentary on each bird, assigning them names and personalities with the creative logic only children possessed. And Victoria, powerful, brilliant, isolated Victoria, sat on the grass beside them and laughed. It was a real laugh, unguarded and genuine, when Tyler named one particularly aggressive goose Mr. Grumpy Pants and declared that he was the boss of all the other birds. The sound seemed to surprise Victoria herself, as if she'd forgotten her own voice could make that noise. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. He reminds me of my CFO, Victoria said, watching Mr. Grumpy Pants chase away a smaller duck, always demanding more than his share. Does your CFO have feathers? Tyler asked seriously. Victoria laughed again. Sometimes I wonder. Marcus watched the exchange, seeing something in Victoria's face that hadn't been there before. A lightness, a presence. She was here, fully here, not lost in grief or work or the hollow spaces where life used to be. She was connecting, even if she didn't quite know how yet. After the bread was gone, Tyler insisted on showing Victoria his favorite climbing tree. Marcus stayed back slightly, giving them space, watching as his son taught this powerful woman how to find the best handholds, how to test branches before trusting them with her weight. Victoria followed Tyler's instructions with careful attention, and when she reached the first major branch, Tyler clapped with such genuine pride that Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "You did it!" Tyler cheered. "You're a good climber." "Thank you," Victoria whispered, her voice thick. "That means a lot." They climbed down together, and Tyler immediately spotted the playground across the field. "Can I go on the swings?" he asked Marcus. "Sure, buddy. Stay where I can see you." Tyler ran off, and Marcus and Victoria sat on a bench nearby, watching him pump his legs to gain height on the swing, his laughter carrying across the field like music. "He's wonderful," Victoria said softly. "You've done an incredible job with him." "It hasn't been easy," Marcus admitted. "There are days when I'm so tired I can barely think straight. Days when the bills pile up and I don't know how we'll make it. Days when he asks about his mom and I don't have good answers." He paused, "But he makes it worth it. Every hard day, every sacrifice, he makes it all worth it." Victoria was quiet for a moment, watching Tyler swing. "Sophie used to love swings," she said finally. "She would stay on them for hours if I let her. She said it felt like flying." Her voice cracked slightly. "The last time we went to a park was 3 months before she died. She was already sick, already weak, but she insisted on the swings. I pushed her so gently, afraid I'd hurt her, but she kept saying, 'Higher, Mama, higher.' So I pushed her higher." Marcus waited, letting her speak at her own pace. "I'm glad I did," Victoria continued, tears streaming down her face now. "I'm glad I gave her that moment of flying, even though I was terrified, because 2 weeks later she couldn't leave the hospital anymore." She wiped her eyes roughly. "I have this video on my phone of that day, her laughing on the swing. I haven't been able to watch it since the funeral. But this morning, watching Tyler," she turned to Marcus, "I watched it before I came here, and instead of just pain, I felt grateful. Grateful I had that moment, grateful she got to fly, even for a little while." Marcus felt his own throat tighten. "She sounds like she was amazing." "She was," Victoria said simply. "She was brilliant and kind and funny. She wanted to cure cancer when she grew up." A bitter laugh escaped. "Ironic, isn't it? The researcher's daughter killed by the very thing her mother studied." "It's not ironic," Marcus said quietly. "It's cruel and unfair, and nothing you could have done differently would have changed it." Victoria looked at him sharply. How do you know that? How do you know I didn't miss something, some sign, some treatment? Because I know that guilt, Marcus interrupted gently. I know what it's like to replay every moment, every decision, wondering if you could have changed the outcome. When Sarah died, I spent months torturing myself. If I'd made her take a different route that day, if I'd convinced her to stay home, if. He met Victoria's eyes. But the truth is, sometimes terrible things happen, and it's no one's fault. Not yours, not mine, just life being cruel. Victoria stared at him, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition, relief, the easing of a burden she'd carried alone for too long. How did you forgive yourself? She asked, her voice small. I'm still working on it, Marcus admitted. But Tyler helps. He reminds me that honoring Sarah's memory doesn't mean drowning in guilt. It means living the life she would have wanted for us. Being present, being grateful for what we have instead of only mourning what we lost. I don't know how to do that, Victoria whispered. Then learn, Marcus said. One swing at a time, one duck at a time, one moment at a time. Tyler ran back to them then, breathless and glowing. Victoria, come push me. Daddy always pushes too high and it scares me a little, but it's also fun. Victoria looked at Marcus, fear and hope warring in her eyes. He nodded encouragingly, and she stood, letting Tyler take her hand and pull her towards the swings. Marcus watched as Victoria positioned herself behind the swing, her hands uncertain on the chains. Tyler looked back at her with complete trust, and Victoria began to push, gently at first, then with more confidence as Tyler's delighted laughter filled the air. Higher, Tyler called, echoing Sophie's words from years ago, and Victoria pushed higher, tears streaming down her face, but a smile breaking through, giving this living, vibrant child the gift of flying while honoring the memory of her own daughter who had loved the same feeling. It was painful and beautiful and healing all at once, and Marcus felt his own eyes burning as he watched. After the playground, they walked slowly back through the park, Tyler between them, holding both their hands. They talked about small things, favorite foods, childhood memories, the changing leaves. Victoria told stories about Sophie that made Tyler laugh, and Marcus realized this was the first time she'd spoken about her daughter without only pain, that joy was creeping back into the memories. When they reached the parking lot, Tyler hugged Victoria goodbye with the fierce affection of a child who didn't understand social boundaries or class divisions, who only knew that he liked this sad lady who was becoming less sad. Can you come to dinner at our house? Tyler asked. Daddy makes really good spaghetti. Well, it's okay spaghetti, but we have ice cream after. Victoria looked at Marcus, questioning. He shrugged. The invitation's genuine if you want. I would love that, Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. When? Next Friday, Marcus offered, 7 o'clock. I'll be there, Victoria promised. She got into her car, and before she drove away, she rolled down the window. Thank you, she said to Marcus, for today, for letting me remember what it feels like to be alive. Thank you for showing up, Marcus replied. As they watched her car disappear, Tyler tugged on Marcus's hand. Daddy, Victoria's not so sad anymore. No, buddy, Marcus said, picking up his son. I don't think she is. The week passed in a strange pattern of anticipation. Marcus went to work, and occasionally he would see Victoria in passing, in the elevator, in the cafeteria, once in the lobby when she was leaving for a meeting. Each time their eyes would meet, and something unspoken would pass between them. An acknowledgement, a connection that existed outside the normal hierarchies of their worlds. On Wednesday, Marcus found an envelope in his locker at work. Inside was a check for $3,000 and a note in elegant handwriting for Tyler's speech therapy, not charity, investment in a remarkable child's future. Please don't refuse. V. Marcus stared at the check for a long time, pride warring with practicality, $3,000 would cover 15 sessions, nearly 8 months of therapy. It would ease the burden of extra shifts, give him more time with Tyler. But accepting it felt like crossing a line, like confirming the inequality between their worlds rather than bridging it. That night, he called the number Victoria had written at the bottom of the note. She answered on the second ring. "I can't accept this," Marcus said, without preamble. "Yes, you can," Victoria replied calmly. "It's too much. It changes things." "It changes nothing," Victoria said firmly. "Marcus, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Money that sits in accounts doing nothing meaningful. But this, helping Tyler get the therapy he needs, this is meaningful. This is using resources to make a real difference in a real life." Her voice softened. "Please, let me do this. Not as a CEO writing a check, but as someone who cares about that extraordinary child." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, "Thank you. But Victoria, we're still friends, equals. This doesn't change that." "I know," she said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "I wouldn't want it any other way." Friday evening, Victoria arrived at 7 o'clock exactly, carrying a bakery box that Marcus suspected cost more than his weekly grocery budget. Tyler answered the door and immediately launched into a detailed explanation of his day at school, pulling Victoria inside with complete disregard for the expensive coat she was wearing. The apartment looked exactly as it had that first morning, small, worn, filled with the evidence of a life lived on a tight budget, but with great love. Victoria had brought wine, a bottle that Marcus didn't recognize but suspected was expensive, and he'd made spaghetti, garlic bread, and a salad with ingredients from the discount grocer. They ate at the small kitchen table, Tyler dominating the conversation with stories about his classmates and his latest dinosaur discoveries. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was really paying attention, and Marcus watched the easy way she interacted with his son, the warmth that was replacing the ice. After dinner, Tyler insisted on showing Victoria his room, giving her a detailed tour of his toy collection and his books. Marcus cleaned up the kitchen, listening to their voices drift from the bedroom. Tyler's excited chatter and Victoria's responses increasingly relaxed and genuine. When Tyler finally fell asleep, worn out from excitement, Victoria and Marcus sat on the couch, with wine, the television off, just talking in the dim light of the living room lamp. "I looked you up," Victoria admitted. "I hope that's not creepy, but I wanted to understand who you were." "And?" Marcus asked. "You have a degree in mechanical engineering from State University, top of your class. You were working on a PhD when Sarah got pregnant." Victoria looked at him with new understanding. "You gave it up to support your family." Marcus shrugged. "It was the right choice." "Was it?" Victoria asked gently. "Or was it just the necessary choice?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Both, maybe. I don't regret it. But sometimes I wonder what might have been different if—" He trailed off. "If life hadn't been so hard," Victoria finished. "If you'd had the resources to pursue your dreams and be a father." "Yeah," Marcus admitted. Victoria set down her wine glass. "I could help with that. You could finish your degree. I could—" "No," Marcus said firmly but kindly. "Victoria, I appreciate what you did for Tyler's therapy, but I'm not your project. I'm not someone for you to fix or rescue." Victoria looked stricken. "That's not what I meant." "I know," Marcus said, his voice gentler. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not ashamed of my life. It's hard, yes. It's a struggle, yes. But I'm proud of what I've built, of how I'm raising Tyler, of the choices I've made." He met her eyes. "I don't need you to save me. I need you to see me as an equal, even though our circumstances are different." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. "You're right," she said finally. "I'm sorry. I'm used to solving problems with resources. I forgot that not everything is a problem to be solved." "I'm not a problem," Marcus said, "and neither are you. We're just two people trying to figure out how to keep living after loss." "Two people," Victoria repeated softly, "not CEO and maintenance worker, not rich and poor, just two people." "Exactly." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Victoria said, "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "Before Sophie got sick, I had this plan for my life. Build the company, make groundbreaking discoveries, change the world. And after she died, I threw myself into that plan with everything I had, thinking that if I could just achieve enough, do enough, it would make her death mean something." She looked at her hands. "But the more I achieved, the emptier I felt. The bigger the company grew, the smaller my world became. I was surrounded by people but completely alone." "And now?" Marcus asked. "Now I'm sitting in your living room wearing jeans instead of a suit, drinking wine instead of working until midnight, and I feel more alive than I have in 3 years." She looked at him with wondering eyes. "How did you do that? How did you and Tyler make me feel human again?" Marcus smiled. "We didn't do anything. We just showed up as ourselves. And you let yourself be yourself too, instead of the image you've been hiding behind." Victoria reached out and took his hand, a gesture of connection that felt natural despite the strangeness of their situation. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not treating me like I'm untouchable, for letting me be part of your world." "Thank you for not treating me like I'm invisible," Marcus replied. They sat like that for a while, hands linked, two people from vastly different worlds, finding unexpected common ground in shared grief, shared humanity, shared hope that maybe, despite everything, life could still hold moments of genuine connection. When Victoria finally left that night, she hugged Marcus goodbye at the door, and the embrace felt like a promise that whatever this was between them, it was real, it mattered, and it was worth protecting. After she was gone, Marcus stood in his quiet apartment and realized that his carefully constructed world, built on routine and survival and keeping everyone at arm's length, was beginning to open. And instead of fear, he felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time: possibility. Part 3. The Crisis and Transformation, 3,500 words. The crisis came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after that first dinner, in the form of a phone call that changed everything. Marcus was at work repairing a ventilation unit on the 9th floor when his phone rang. The school's number. His heart dropped immediately. They only called when something was wrong. "Mr. Chen," the nurse's voice was calm but urgent. "Tyler had an accident on the playground. He fell from the climbing structure. We've called an ambulance. You need to meet us at City Memorial." The world tilted. Marcus barely remembered the rush to the hospital, the frantic drive through traffic, the cold fear that gripped his chest like a vice. Not Tyler. Please, not Tyler. He couldn't lose his son. He couldn't survive that. When he burst through the emergency room doors, a doctor was waiting. "Mr. Chen, your son has a concussion and a broken arm. He's stable, but we need to keep him overnight for observation." Relief flooded through Marcus so powerfully, his knees nearly buckled. Stable. Tyler was stable. "Can I see him?" "Of course. Room 112. Tyler looked so small in the hospital bed, his arm in a temporary cast, a bandage on his forehead, but his eyes were open and he managed a weak smile when Marcus entered. "Hi, Daddy, I fell." Marcus sat beside the bed and took his son's good hand, tears streaming down his face. "I know, buddy, but you're going to be okay." It hurts, Tyler whispered. I know, but the doctors are going to help. Marcus kissed his son's forehead gently. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. The immediate crisis passed, but a new one emerged when the hospital administrator appeared with paperwork. The overnight stay, the x-rays, the doctor consultations. Even with his basic insurance, Marcus was looking at bills totaling over $4,000. Money he didn't have. Money that would mean choosing between medical debt and rent, between Tyler's recovery and keeping a roof over their heads. Marcus sat in the hallway outside Tyler's room, his head in his hands, trying to figure out how to make the impossible work. He could pick up extra shifts, maybe sell some things, maybe... Marcus. He looked up to find Victoria standing there, still in her business suit, her face pale with worry. I heard what happened. I came as soon as I could. How did you know? Marcus asked, too exhausted to question it further. I have alerts set for employee emergencies, Victoria said, sitting beside him. Is he okay? Broken arm, concussion. They're keeping him overnight. Marcus's voice cracked. He's okay. He's going to be okay. Victoria put her hand on his shoulder, a gesture of comfort that felt natural now. Thank goodness, can I see him? They walked into Tyler's room together, and the boy's face lit up when he saw Victoria. Victoria! I fell down. Look, I have a cast. I see that, Victoria said, her voice gentle as she approached the bed. You're very brave. Daddy cried, Tyler reported seriously, but he said it's okay to cry when you're scared. Your daddy is very wise, Victoria said, glancing at Marcus with soft eyes. They stayed with Tyler for an hour, taking turns reading to him until he drifted off to sleep. In the hallway outside, Marcus finally broke down, the stress and fear and overwhelming relief crashing over him all at once. Victoria held him as he cried, her own tears falling silently, and Marcus realized that somewhere along the way, this woman had become someone he could lean on, someone who saw his strength but also held space for his weakness. The bills, Marcus said finally, pulling back and wiping his eyes. I don't know how I'm going to pay for all of this. Let me help, Victoria said immediately. Victoria, no, we talked about this. This is different, Victoria interrupted firmly. This is an emergency. This is your son's health. She took both his hands in hers. Marcus, I understand your pride. I respect it. But right now, Tyler needs the best care, and you need to focus on being his father, not on how you're going to afford it. Please, let me help. Marcus wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at him to maintain his independence, to not become another charity case for a wealthy benefactor. But when he looked through the window at Tyler sleeping in that hospital bed, so small and vulnerable, he knew what mattered most. Okay, he whispered. Thank you. Victoria squeezed his hands. You're welcome. And Marcus, this doesn't change anything between us. You're still not my project. You're my friend. Friends, Marcus repeated, and despite everything, he smiled slightly. When did that happen? I think it happened the moment your son showed me his dinosaurs and reminded me what kindness looks like, Victoria said softly. But the financial crisis was only the beginning. 3 days later, when Tyler was home and recovering, Marcus was called into his supervisor's office. The man looked uncomfortable, refusing to meet Marcus's eyes. Chen, we need to talk about Dr. Lang. Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach. What about her? People are talking about you two, about her visiting your apartment, about the park, about the hospital. His supervisor shifted awkwardly. Look, I don't care what you do on your own time, but there are concerns about appropriateness, about conflicts of interest. There's no conflict, Marcus said carefully. We're friends. Friends? His supervisor raised an eyebrow. A maintenance worker and the CEO? Come on, Chen. People are saying you're taking advantage, that you're using your kid to manipulate her for money. The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow. We're not. I'm just telling you what people are saying. And HR is concerned. They're talking about transferring you to another facility, somewhere where this situation won't be an issue. Transfer. Away from the building where he'd worked for 3 years. Away from the schedule that allowed him to be there when Tyler got home from school. Away from Victoria. Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. I haven't done anything wrong, he said firmly. Maybe not, but it doesn't look good. Just be careful, Chen, for your own sake. That evening, Marcus called Victoria. She answered immediately, her voice warm. Marcus, hi, how's Tyler? He's fine, healing, but we need to talk. He explained what his supervisor had said, the accusations, the threat of transfer. Victoria, maybe we should take a step back. I can't lose this job. Tyler and we need the stability, the insurance. No. Victoria's voice was sharp, almost fierce. Absolutely not. You're not being punished for being my friend. She paused. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you want to stop being friends? Do you regret letting me into your life? Marcus thought about Tyler's laughter when Victoria visited, about the conversations late at night when they talked about grief and hope and the messy business of healing. He thought about how his world had expanded from just survival to something richer, more connected. No, he said quietly, I don't regret it. Then we stand together, Victoria said. We don't hide. We don't apologize for caring about each other. We just live honestly. The next day, Victoria did something that shocked the entire company. She called an all-staff meeting and stood before hundreds of employees with her heart laid bare. 3 years ago, I lost my daughter to cancer, she began, her voice steady but thick with emotion. In my grief, I threw myself into work, building this company, achieving success. But the truth is, I was hiding from life. She looked directly at Marcus, standing in the back. Recently, someone reminded me what it means to be human. A maintenance worker, a single father, someone most of you pass every day without noticing. Her voice hardened. There are rumors about my friendship with Marcus Chen, rumors suggesting he's taking advantage of me. I want to address that directly. The room fell silent. Marcus and his son saved my life, Victoria said simply. They showed me that genuine connection doesn't care about titles or bank accounts. They taught me that healing comes from showing up for each other, from being vulnerable, from allowing ourselves to be seen. She paused. Marcus Chen will not be transferred. He will not face consequences for being my friend. And if any of you have a problem with that, examine why it makes you uncomfortable. The speech ended. For a moment, silence. Then applause began, building until the entire auditorium thundered with it. Marcus stood with tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by her courage. That evening, Victoria came to the apartment. After Tyler fell asleep, they sat close on the couch, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. You didn't have to do that, Marcus said quietly. You put your reputation on the line. My reputation was killing me, Victoria replied. She turned to face him fully. That morning I showed up at your door. I was planning to end my life. I had pills in my car. I'd written a note. Her voice broke. But somehow I ended up here instead. And you didn't turn me away. You made me coffee. You let your son show me his dinosaurs. You treated me like a person worth caring about. Marcus couldn't breathe. Victoria, you gave me a reason to want to live, she continued, taking his hand. Every Friday night, every conversation, every moment of connection, you've been teaching me how to come back from the edge. We saved each other, Marcus said firmly. You gave me something too, someone who sees me as more than just a struggling single dad. someone who makes me remember I'm still a whole person with thoughts and dreams beyond just survival. Something shifted between them. This wasn't just friendship anymore. I don't know what this is, Victoria whispered. We're from such different worlds. We're from the same world, Marcus interrupted gently. The world of people who've loved and lost and are trying to figure out how to keep going. He touched her face softly. Everything else is just details. Victoria leaned into his touch. I'm scared of losing this, of losing you and Tyler. Then don't, Marcus said simply. Keep moving forward, keep showing up. Keep choosing connection over isolation. With you? Victoria asked. With me, Marcus confirmed. If you want. Victoria smiled, genuine and transformative. I want, she whispered. 6 months later, everything had changed. Tyler's speech had improved dramatically. Marcus had been promoted to facilities manager with better pay and regular hours. Victoria had restructured her life, delegating more at work, leaving at reasonable hours, making space for what actually mattered. Marcus and Tyler filled Victoria's big house with laughter most weekends. And several nights a week, Victoria was at the apartment, cooking dinner, helping with homework, being present in the beautiful mundane moments that make up a life. One evening, in Victoria's garden, while Tyler played in the treehouse she'd built for him, Marcus said, "You know what Sophie would think of all this?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but not just pain anymore. "What?" "I think she'd be proud of you," Marcus said, "for choosing to live again, for letting yourself love again." "I like to think she sent you to me," Victoria whispered, "that somehow she knew I needed to be reminded how to be a mother, how to love, how to be human." "And Sarah," Marcus added softly, "I like to think she's okay with me moving forward, with letting myself be happy again." Tyler ran up to them, breathless and excited. "Victoria, come see what I built." Victoria laughed and stood, taking the boy's hand. She looked back at Marcus, and in her eyes was everything they'd found together: gratitude, hope, love, and the quiet joy of second chances. "Coming?" she asked. Marcus smiled and followed them into the treehouse, into the life they were building together, into the future neither had thought possible. Because sometimes in the darkest moments, when you think you're at the end of your story, you're actually just at the beginning. Sometimes the person who saves you is the one you least expect. And sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin in the most ordinary ways, with a wrong turn in the darkness, a cup of coffee in a worn kitchen, and a 6-year-old boy with plastic dinosaurs and a heart full of unconditional acceptance. Marcus, Victoria, and Tyler weren't a perfect family, but they were a real one, and in the end, that was all that mattered. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.